In Fusion, we can use the power of parametric modeling to create objects like this laser cut cell phone stand very quickly. We can model it in 3D, then we can lay the parts flat and create a tool path. We can even set up a tool that has an editable kerf so we can account for kerf when we're cutting out our designs to ensure a tight fit. We can also use the features of parametric modeling to use variables. That way we can enter in data that will change our design based on the parameters we select. This is very convenient because then we can adapt our designs to different use cases. In order to do that, we need to have some user parameters. So here in this file, I've already saved it. Then in the modify panel, I want to go to modify, change parameters. And here I have some user parameters set. I have device height, 145, device width, 69, device thickness, 8.5. I have ply. This is the thickness of the material, so I can change that depending on what material. Maybe I have 1/8 inch plywood or 1/4 inch plywood or a different thickness of plexiglass. And I can measure these with calipers before I go to the laser cutter and then change this dimension and output my file. This is the border around the tray that holds the cell phone. And then I made a variable for angle. That way I can change the angle that the cell phone lays down if I want to change that as well. In order to add a new parameter, all you do is click this plus button. So I could add a parameter for tab and call this 25 millimeters and say, okay. So now I have another parameter right here. So you can create as many parameters as you need. You can also create parameters that are equations. So for example, I can create a parameter as double thick, and I can say ply times 2. Now that gives me a value of 6.35. I don't need this parameter, but it is something that I could use. I can also type these dimensions directly in my sketch. So now that we have our user parameters, let's go ahead and make a sketch. But remember, before we do anything, we want to create a component. I'm going to call this component leg 1. I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to create this sketch on the ZY plane. Then I'm going to start drawing some lines. I'm going to start at the origin. I'm going to draw a line out. And I'm going to draw a line up. And notice that I'm using the automatic constraint. So I'm getting these 90-degree constraints. Then I'm drawing down. And I'm drawing up at 90 degrees again. And I'm drawing over. And then I'm drawing down. Now on this one, I didn't get 90 degrees. So if that happens to you, you can go ahead and click constraints, this one and this one. And now I have that perpendicular constraint right there. So now let's start using some of those dimensions that we had to further define this sketch. First, I can press D, then I can click this line and this line. And instead of 114, I can type angle. Now this will be remembered as that angle, and I can change that in my user parameters. Sometimes when you're defining a sketch, this can happen. That's fine. Make sure you select the select tool, and then we can move these sketch elements around so that they are in the right spot. This is one of the main reasons we need to fully define a sketch, because we don't want unpredictable behavior like that. So let's go ahead and continue defining the sketch. We need to define the length of this line. I'm going to click D and then pull off this line. And for this one, I'm going to make a formula. I'm going to say device width, so how wide is the cell phone? I'm going to say plus border, the border dimension that I had, plus ply. So we have device width plus border plus ply. And if I press enter there, then that will be set up just like that. So then we can continue defining our sketch. So for this dimension, I'm going to bring this down at an angle here. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say device thickness plus ply times 3. So now that's much skinnier there. And again, my sketch has moved around, so that's fine. I can just bring this up. What we need to do is really just bring this whole thing down, and then we'll change the dimensions of our sketch here. So for example, this line here is super wide, but we'll fix that. So first, we're going to go ahead and give this line a dimension of 20. That'll pull the sketch all down and be closer to the size that we want. Now this is the strange dimension that's super long. So we can go ahead and fix that by drawing in our legs. So we want to have some legs to this. So we're going to draw an angle like this. And then we can give this some dimension. So we'll click on this one, and we'll type angle. And we'll click on this line and this line, and we'll do the same thing. I can just click this dimension. It'll be the same. And now let's go ahead and make this thinner. So if I click here, I can type in 10. That'll bring that over. Then I can click here. I can say 10. And then if I click here to here, I can go ahead and say 20. Is this dimension here? And if we say that is 10, that starts to pull everything in. So we just have a few more things to define, and you can move your dimensions around as your sketch starts to become more legible. It's always good to keep everything nice and neat. So we need to define this dimension. So I'm going to click D and then click those 2 points, bring it over here, and I'm going to type device width divided by 2. So now we have all these parameters that have fully defined our sketch. We can tell our sketch is fully defined because if we come over here in our sketches, we have a padlock. Now with our fully defined sketch, let's go ahead and add some tabs that are going to hold our design together while we use it. So first, I'm going to get the line tool and I'm going to draw off this. And here I want to pay attention and try to get that 90-degree snap. There's another 90 degrees. And then I'm going to click. I'm going to draw with the line tool again, out 90 degrees, down. And if you didn't get a 90-degree snap, that's okay. Go ahead and grab your perpendicular constraint and then click those 2 lines. In this case, it is all perpendicular, so we're good to go. And then we're going to draw one more tab. We're going to draw a tab down here. So there's my 90-degree snap, my snap, and my snap. Now our sketch is no longer fully defined. So let's press the D key and start defining it. We want all these tabs to be the thickness of our material. So I'm going to click here. Make sure you're perpendicular, and I'm going to type ply. So now this will be the thickness of the plywood and will change based on our design. Here, I'm going to do the same thing and click ply. Now that's the same. I could type ply here again, or I could just click that dimension. So there's many ways to dimension that out. So now we're getting closer, but we still have a number of dimensions that aren't made. So let's do this bottom one first. So we're going to have a piece of plywood sitting here for the cell phone to rest on. So I'm going to dimension out this side. And I'm going to say ply times 1.5. So 1.5 plies. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to go from here to here. And I'm just going to click that dimension again. And that's the same. So now this will be a symmetrical piece. It'll fit on either way. So next, let's go ahead and dimension this piece out. I know that this, I kind of like to have be 25. So I'm going to click 25. And I want them to be equal. So there's 2 ways to do that. I could dimension it, or I could use the equal constraint and click this one and this one. And now they're equal. Now we're getting much closer. We just have a few blue lines that we need to define. So let's define this distance down here. So we're going to have ply here. So that takes up at least 1 ply. And then we'd like to have some distance before the plywood. So let's go ahead and press D. And we'll go from this mark here to this mark here, and we'll call that ply times 3. And it's nice to have a symmetrical piece. So let's come up to the top here and click this dimension and this dimension, and we'll say ply times 3. So now once again, we have a fully defined sketch. Everything is black. So that's great. But I'm going to make one more addition. Up here, the plywood's going to be sticking off at an angle like that. So what I'd like to have is it cleanly come down to the edge here. I'm going to grab a line, click here, and then I'm going to go down like this. And I need to define this, so I can use the perpendicular constraint, click this one, and now that's perpendicular. So the plywood will be nice and smooth on top. Great, so now we have a fully defined sketch. Not a bad time to save, so press Control S or Command S. Save, and I'm going to say leg sketch. Great. So now I'm going to finish the sketch. And here we are. And let's go ahead and extrude. So I'm going to click the extrude. And now I need to click all the profiles. We need to get these tabs. So make sure you go in there and click these. We don't want the piece that's in between the leg. So don't worry about that. And then we can just type ply. And that will give us our ply dimension and say, okay. Now we want to activate the top component and we'll create a component and we'll call this component leg 2. And before we make leg 2, we want to make a construction plane that we can control the distance of so we can control it based on our device. So we're going to go ahead and construct an offset plane. And I like to click on the origin plane rather than the space because I know the origin plane isn't going to move. And then I'm going to go negative device height. If I go negative device height, it will go over how thick my device is. And then I'll press OK. Then I'm going to create a sketch. And I'm going to create it on this offset plane right there. And I can use the project command by pressing P on my keyboard. And I can select faces in this case or bodies. It'll do the same thing. So I'll select this face, press OK. And then I can finish my sketch. So here we now have a sketch that was made on that offset plane. Let's extrude. And we want to go this direction. And we want to go negative ply. And press enter. So now we have both our legs and they are both components. And they are editable if I change my device width. This is always a good time to check that out. So let's go to our user parameters. And if I change the device height to 100, everything moves together, right? So this is adaptable. And then if I go back and I change the parameters of my device height, I can type 145. And now this will be spaced appropriately for my device. I could do the same thing for the width, and that would grow taller. So I can activate this component, or I can right-click on the component and click New Component. And we're going to call this component Tray. And now this component is activated, and we want to create a sketch. We're going to create a little tray that goes across here. So I'm going to create a sketch. And for the plane, I'm going to go ahead and select that plane. And now I want to project all of the pieces. So I want this piece, and sometimes that's a little hard to see. So rotate around and I click this one. Make sure you have the selection filter as faces, not bodies. Then I'm going to come in here and select this one, that one, and that one, and then press OK. So now what we want to do is draw a rectangle on this sketch. So I'm going to press R for rectangle, and I'm just going to draw it off so you can see how the constraints work. And I want to add some collinear constraints. So I want to click this line and that line, so that'll be collinear. Then I'll click this line and now that's collinear. So we're almost there. We almost have a defined sketch, but let's add a border. So I'll press D, and I want to click from this line to this line, and I'm going to type border. That's one of our user parameters, so we can change that. Then we'll come over here and we'll make a dimension of border. So we have this sketch almost all done, but notice I didn't project this piece in. So what you can do is press project, press OK, and then I want to delete this collinear constraint. So I want to delete these constraints, and now I should be able to click the collinear constraint. So now I have my sketch finished, and I need to create an extrude. So what I want to do is click everything but that tab. So I'll click this face, this face, this face. And you can see what's happening as Fusion creates the extrusion. So I can click this one, and this one. So now I press OK, and I want to make sure that it says new body. Now up at the top cell phone level, I'm going to right click and make a new component. I'm going to call this component top. And then I'm going to sketch right on the front face here. So I'll create a sketch, and I'll click this face. And I want to press P again, and I want to include all of these faces. Then I can press OK. And in this particular case, I want one more face. I want the tray because I want to be able to subtract that out. I'm going to press P and get the front of that tray. So now we have everything we need to make this sketch. So let's go ahead and draw a rectangle. And again, we'll draw the rectangle out so we can learn how constraints work. And you can always fix your constraints. And once you understand them, it's much easier just to go ahead and draw them from the beginning. But this way, you know, if you get into problems, how to fix your constraints. So I'm going to make a collinear constraint there. And then the same thing here. I'm going to make a collinear constraint with the top of that. Now we just have to add some dimensions and our sketch will be fully defined. So I'll click from here to here. And then I'll click border. And then I'll do one more. I'll click from here to here. And I'll say border. Now all that is ready to go. I'll finish my sketch. We'll click extrude. I'll click this middle panel, this panel, this panel, and then I'll fill in the tabs. And the distance will be pi. Excellent. So now we have all the pieces there, but we'd like to have something in the back here to keep it from falling apart. So let's go ahead and right click on the top component. This is important so you keep all your components at the same level. New component, and we'll call this one support or brace. I'm going to call it brace. And now we need to be able to place this component. And if you remember, this distance is 10 millimeters. You could change that distance, but we know that from our original sketch. So I'm going to construct an offset plane from this edge, and then I'm going to go in -5 millimeters. Then I can create a sketch right on that plane. So I'll select that plane, and we'll go ahead and press P to select these two faces. You want to make sure you select that outer face. Sometimes it can be a little tricky to see through. So here I've selected the line. So I don't want the line, I want the whole face. And there we go. Then I can press OK. So now we have these two faces. And so what I want to do is draw a rectangle. And this time I want the rectangle, I'm going to click on back here. I want the rectangle to actually be coincident with these. So I'm going to click on that line and then click on that line. So now I already have two parts of my sketch defined. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and put a midpoint constraint. So I can click this line, and that will move that up to the midpoint. So I don't have to worry about that. And then I can just make this dimension and say how big it is. And let's call it 20. Okay, so now we have all of that defined. And if we look down in our brace sketch, our sketch has the padlock. But there's no way for this brace to attach because it's kind of in the middle. So let's go ahead and draw some tabs. So I'm going to get the L key, or I could use the rectangle. Let's use the rectangle. And we'll draw a rectangle here. And then we'll draw a rectangle on this side. And we can line these up. That could have been lined up right there. That would have been fine. And then we'll give it a dimension of 5. And then we can give this dimension. We can click here and here. And we can say 20 minus 5. And then we can just divide that by 2. So then that is all fully constrained. Here, since we didn't put a constraint when we drew the rectangle, we can click here and just type ply. So that'll be locked in there. And then we can give this the same dimension as we have over there of 5. And then we did the math on the other side, so we can remember that. And just type here 7.5. Great, so now we have a fully defined sketch. Let's finish our sketch. And now extrude. If I click this plane, then I want to click this, and 2 more. And this time we're going to pull out a little bit different. We're going to extrude symmetric. So we're going to go both ways. That means the distance is not just ply. We're going to go ply divided by 2. And so what I'll do is do half ply on each side, and it'll keep this nice and centered on that leg. So now I'm going to go ahead and click at the top of the cell phone tray. And we need to do some combine actions so we actually have these holes. Up at the top, we can click combine, and it says the target body. So this is the target body. And then we need the tool body. We're going to use this. Operation is cut, and we want to keep the tools. Sometimes this isn't checked, so make sure that's checked. Say OK. Then we need to do that one more time. Target body, tool body, cut. OK. So now if I hide the brace, you can see that I have holes there that the brace will fit in. This is great. So now we have everything assembled. We'll go ahead and save that. Now we have all the pieces. Let's add some fillets because a laser cutter is going to make these really sharp corners. So that's not so fun. So we're going to go ahead and start at the top. And on leg 1, we'll go ahead and add some fillets on that. And what we can do is we can right click, isolate. And if I click the fillet, I can, on the top of each of these little tabs, I can click the corners. Each of those tabs there. And then I can give them a fillet 0.1 millimeter. So just to take the sharp edge off when I'm handling it. Then I can create another fillet. I can click this one. All the other edges I'll click. Great. And then I can give this a fillet. Well, let's say at least 2. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's nice and round, but still has some nice sturdiness to it. Say OK. Now I'm going to activate leg 2 and then right click to isolate leg 2. So now that's the only thing I can see. Off click, click the fillet command. And what we want to do is go ahead and click these top faces on the tabs that are going to be very sharp. And then we'll do 0.1 for those just to take the edge off. And in this case, you see I missed this fillet. You can right click, edit the feature. And if you hold the command or the control key, you can add fillets. And you can also add multiple fillets to one command, but sometimes it gets confusing. That's why I'm doing it as 2 features. So now I'm going to click all of these. And then we'll type 2 millimeters. Great. So we have those fillets. Let's activate the tray component and then let's isolate it. So here's our tray. So this is the front of our model. Let's go ahead and click the fillet command. So we have that one and this one. And on these 2, we're just going to do the 0.1 just to take the sharpness off. And then on the front here, we'll click the fillet, and those 2 front ones, we'll give it a much larger fillet of 5. So now that has that nice fillet on there. Now let's activate the top component, isolate it. We'll do the same thing. We'll click the fillet command, click this bottom one. And this one on those, we'll just give it a 0.1. And then we'll go ahead and click the fillets on the top. Click the fillet command. And we'll give this a nice round as well, 5 millimeters. That's nice and smooth on the top. And then finally, we'll activate the brace component, isolate it, click the fillet command, and we'll just take off the little sharpness of these edges. This isn't something that you have to do, but it can be nice to not have super sharp edges on your laser cut. So do this as your preference. Okay, so all these are done. I'm going to right click, unisolate, and then activate the top component so we can see our stand. So there we go. Now we have our complete stand. All we need to do now is export it as a file that we can cut on our laser cutter. One thing that's nice that you can do to double check to see if your work is good. One thing that you can do to see if your design is making sense is go to your data panel and you can double check it by inserting a model of the device you want. So I have a phone here that I've modeled up. You can right click, insert into current design. And it's just going to be on the ground there, but that's fine. We can rotate it if we want, but I'm going to show you a way that we can just add this onto here. So I'm just going to press OK. And what we want to do is assemble this. So I'm going to close this data panel and then click Assemble. And this makes a joint. What I want to do is look at the back of the cell phone, click here, and then look at the tray, click here, and it's going to be locked in place. And now you might be thinking, well, it's up in the air. So just press OK. Then we can click on Inspect, Measure. We can come down here and we can click on this face and then this face, and it'll tell us, oh, that distance is 7 millimeters. So we'll go ahead and close that. And then we can right click in the timeline, Edit Joint. And we can move it down. So this is in the Y direction. And if we type -7, OK. Now we can see our cell phone sitting on our tray. So this is all ready to be laser cut. I'm going to go ahead and save this and say stand finished. But now we need to set up our cam. We're going to do this in a way that if we come back and change our design, we don't have to reset our cam up because that can be annoying. So we're going to set it up for manufacturing in a way that is editable. So what we need to do is create a new component. Right click at the top and new component. And you can call this component cam or manufacture or making, whatever you want. I'm going to call it cam. Right click on that component and make a new component. I'm going to call this one plywood. So you can see how this component is underneath this and it makes an assembly. In the plywood component, I'm going to create a sketch on the ground plane. And I'm going to create a rectangle, draw it out. I can type 12 inches, tab, 12 inches, enter. Then I can dimension it from the origin. And we're going to go this device height. That way it will always be far enough away. And then from the origin to this line, we'll go ahead and press 6 inches. We can finish that sketch. And there we have a piece of plywood over there. Well, we will once we extrude it. So click extrude and then type ply for your thickness. And then say OK. Now what I want to do is activate the cam assembly. So you see here over on the left, I have the dot there. I can shift click all the pieces, right click, copy, and then right click on cam and paste. Now there's two options. If you paste new, they won't be connected to the original design, but if you click paste, they'll be connected to the original design. So if you make changes, these pieces will change too. So we click paste. Now all these are inside the cam assembly, and we can just move it over and move it out of the way so we can see what we're doing. And then say OK. So now we have two copies. And what we're going to do is create joints that lay these pieces out on our piece of plywood to create our tool paths. So I'm going to click joint. And then I'm going to click the back of the tray. And then the top of our plywood. And then click one more time. Then I can edit where this goes. So I can move this up and make a layout for my cutting. Press OK. I'm going to make another joint. So click assemble. And I'm going to click the bottom side of the tray. And then click the plywood. And move that there. Press OK. Now I'm going to assemble one more joint. Now click this piece. Then click there. And then I can move it over. And move it up. Say OK. And these joints are editable. So if you have a different layout that you decide, you can do that later. So now let's get the two legs. I'm going to click right there. And then on the surface, you can move it into position. OK. And then finally, let's create a joint here to here. One more time. And this time when we move it, we can go ahead and rotate it so it fits in and press OK. So now we have all these pieces laid out and we can create tool paths. But the magic of this is if I go to the original top and I activate that component and we have this second fillet and I edit this feature, and let's go ahead and make this fillet 8 millimeters, or let's even make it 13. You see that's much bigger. And then right here, this is also increased in size. So we don't have to go back and change our design or our tool layout because this will update automatically. So that's very convenient if you want to make minor tweaks to your design. You don't have to redo all of this. So I'm going to edit that feature and put it back to 5 millimeters. And this is also a good time to click the top level component, press Control S or Command S to save. And I'm going to say parts laid out. Okay, so now what we need to do is create tool paths that we can export as a DXF file and use on the laser cutter. So we'll move into the manufacturer workspace. When we're in the manufacturer workspace, the first thing to do to create a setup, click this folder. And the type of operation, we want to click cutting. So we have a cutting operation, and it's asking us to do something. So we can select the stock if we this little cube here, and then we can just select this plywood. So now it knows that's the stock. And for the laser cutter, we don't need to worry about the origin. If we're doing some router CNCing, we need to worry about that. And then we can come back over here and we can select the model. We can select all of these pieces so it knows that's the model. And then we can press OK. Now we have our setup. So now we have to make a tool path. So if we come up to cutting, we want to select 2D profile. And for the tool, we'll go ahead and select. I have a laser cut tool already made. If you want to see how to make a laser cut tool, please see the previous video linked in the description. I'll click this tool. And what's great about this is this has Kerf built in. So it has the kerf width of this laser. And you can change that based on the materials or what's happening. So I'm going to select that tool. Now I need to select the geometry. So I can go ahead and click each of the pieces. And if you look, Fusion automatically selects that geometry. So I just select the top face of each piece. Now I have all the geometry. Everything should be fine. And the only thing we need to make sure is on passes that you pick either left or right. Don't pick center. And then for compensation type, this is something that you'll mess up and you will wonder where your file is. You need to say in computer and then say OK. And so now it's calculating those tool paths, and you can see it has the tool path to do that, and it has the kerf already in there. It's very small. It's a very small kerf, but you can see how this line is off the edge, so our pieces will be the actual size. And then finally, we need to come up here to post process. And what we want to do is use personal posts. And if you want to know how to get this DXF post file from AutoCAD, please see the video linked in the description. An important thing to do is click the Properties tab. We want to click two properties. So by default, only cutting will not be clicked. We want to click that because we don't want to have these yellow lines in our file. And then the last thing we want to make sure that we click is Include Drill. By default, the drills are included, so we want to uncheck that. And if we press OK, it asks us where we want to save it. I'm going to go ahead and save it on the desktop, and I'm going to call this phone stand cut. And it doesn't usually add the extension, so go ahead and type DXF, then save. And now we have a DXF file that's ready for printing. And if we go to Adobe Illustrator, we can File, and then we want to make sure we scale by our document units. Press OK. Then for the Epilog laser cutter that I'm using, I need to change these strokes to a smaller width. So I can marquee select all of these. And in the properties panel, I can save this as 0.001 stroke. And then File, Save As, Phone Cut Stand AI. And I'm ready to take it to the Epilog printer and print on my material. So happy laser cut stand designing and cutting.